My wife's affair turned me into an evil monster. I know I'm a monster. I 32 am, and not here seeking forgiveness or advice, nor do I care if anybody condemns me. Nothing you say will have any effect on me since I'm cold-hearted and wicked. Perhaps this is more of a forewarning, that there are individuals out there like me. It's been around 3 years since my D-Day. My wife 33F had begun to behave shady, and I was looking at ways to monitor her phone and computer in order to obtain some solid proof. I was doing that when I opened a letter I had received the day before. It had a speeding ticket in it, as well as a photo of my wife in her vehicle with the employee I was suspicious about. Examining the date, I quickly realized this was the time she was meant to be at a work seminar. So there was no question about what was going on. The next Friday, my wife drank her normal 3-4 glasses of wine to unwind after the previous week's work. I gave her half a crushed sleeping pill in her final lesson, and she passed asleep. Yes, I drugged her to discover the truth, and I make no apologies for it. I opened her phone using her fingerprint and began browsing through it, installing spyware and downloading everything. Except for some bizarre communications back and forth with her colleague, who was continually talking about some presentation. There wasn't anything conclusive there. They seemed to be delivering material all the time. I reasoned that there had to be something else, either a new app or a second phone. I checked everywhere and eventually located a phone in her car's glove compartment. I opened it the same manner, and there was a mountain of evidence within. I copied everything again and installed spyware. I woke up the kids, ages 4 and 6, by leaving 2 phones on the table in front of her with a post-it note that simply said I know everything. I brought the kids to my parents and explained what was going on, as well as that I would be gone for a long. I had previously hired a lawyer and opened new bank accounts since I was wary of my wife. Over the following week, I prepared for the anticipated encounter by gathering all of the necessary papers for a variety of scenarios. I had one set of documents for a clean divorce, another for a post-nuptial agreement in case we ended up talking reconciliation and so on. The agony of the situation was tremendous, but I understood what was going on and what I had to do. I couldn't exhibit any signs of weakness or uncertainty. I had to be in command. Over the course of the week, my wife became more panicked as she received hundreds of messages and missed calls, and she would ask everyone around her to attempt to contact me as well. I just disregarded it all, putting the phone in a drawer and getting on with what I knew I needed to accomplish. When I was ready, I texted my wife to let her know I'd be over in the afternoon to discuss. She was a complete mess when I arrived. She went to her knees in front of me as soon as I walked through the door, pleading for a second chance and forgiveness. I was having none of it, so I yanked my legs free from her grasp and just stated, "Let's sit and chat." It probably took her about 15 minutes to get to the kitchen table, and I remained emotionless. She noticed I wasn't wearing my wedding band as soon as she sat down. When I handed her the divorce papers, she burst into tears and sobbed for 20 minutes. I said nothing, and when she was finally able to speak, she claimed she would do everything to salvage our marriage. She was weeping again when I retracted the divorce papers and handed her the post-nuptial agreement. I took my time reading over my copy. Essentially, it said that I may divorce her for whatever reason I saw suitable. She was going to receive nothing from me. She will get half of what she was entitled to, but no child support, alimony, or any of my pension or assets. Custody would be split 50/50. She signed it immediately away, and I advised her she should probably consult with a lawyer before returning it to me. She said that she did not need to. I informed her that if she wanted to modify anything, I was willing to talk about it over the following 2 weeks. I never utilized the spyware for anything, but I can confirm that she has never communicated with her AP again. Then I told her she needed to make a detailed chronology, since I knew practically everything. If I caught her in a lie or omission, whether now or later, the result would be an instant divorce. I gave her a week to finish it and then departed. She emailed me a big file a week later that described everything, including her reasons and justifications. I instructed her to get ready to go, printed a hard copy, and drove over to our home to pick her up. I took her directly to her AP home and stopped at the driveway. She was in complete shock and asked what we were doing there. I handed her the physical copy and told her, "You're going to admit what you did to his wife." I don't recall precisely what she said, but it was something along the lines of "I can't do this to him," or anything along those lines. I returned the hard copy, started the vehicle, and drove down the road about 5-6 blocks to the nearest bus station. I was boiling at this point, because I was so mad. I told her she needed to get the F out of the vehicle. She declined, asking, "Let's speak, please." I believe my facial expressions told it all. She stopped talking and just gazed at me, as if she didn't know what to do. I informed her gently, "You were only given the option of choosing between your AP and your family. And you've already decided on your AP. It's not like I'm abandoning you in a ditch. Here is a bus stop. You're an adult. I'm confident you can figure it out. Hit the out of the automobile now." She got out and said, "What happens now?" Since my tone left no space for wriggle room. I simply drove away so hard that the door crashed shut. I turned around and drove back to the APS home, where I could see my wife running towards me and hear her shouting in the distance as she realized what was going on. I was planning on informing the APS wife. His wife was 5 months pregnant, and when she saw my wife's timeline, she burst into tears. Her husband dashed around the corner only to pause for a split second before bolting through the house and out the back door as soon as he noticed me. His wife eventually divorced him and severely beat him up in court. Anyway, my wife was fretting and pleading at home as I grabbed some belongings and went. I informed her on the way out that her admitting to the wife was a test. It was a test to determine whether she had gotten over her AP and if she really accepted responsibility for what she had done. She failed the exam, and I had informed his wife. My wife's opportunity to persuade me that reconciliation was even feasible. That opportunity was passed, and there was no turning back the clock. We would divorce as a consequence of her infidelity. I leased a little inexpensive home outside of town, more of a hut, with a water heater and lights, but very little electrical heating. One of the cast iron fireplaces served as the primary heat source. It was the dead of winter, with temperatures dropping to -15 degrees Celsius at night, so I had to keep the fire burning or the house would freeze. My head basically shattered during the following 4 days in the cabin, and I began drinking excessively. The agony was just excruciating, even after being bathed in alcohol. I decided to put a stop to it at one point, so I loaded my shotgun, placed it in my mouth, and squeezed the trigger with my toe. It simply clicked, and the shell was a dud. After that, I drank even more heavily, and the following several days were a haze. Several days later, when I awoke, I was in a pool of my own vomit, blood, and excrement. I got a concussion and was in excruciating agony in my arm and chest. I was terribly dehydrated and hypothermic. It took me a while to realize that I had crushed my whiskey bottle after falling on top of it. Glass jars were protruding from my arm and chest, and when I eventually made it to the restroom, I saw I had a dark purple-black eye, indicating that I had probably hit my head on the floor rather hard. I managed to clean myself up a little and change out of my dirty clothing. It didn't really matter since after I got the glass shards out, everything was coated in blood. I wasn't fully present, but I figured out that I needed to call an ambulance. I stepped outside to wait for them, but by the time they came, I was comatose. My wife was still listed as my emergency contact, and I'm guessing she was phoned at some time. She was there when I awoke, continually chatting, and I replied nothing, not a single word. I returned to my small cold hut and spent the next 3 weeks recuperating. During this time, I began to understand that something was terribly broken inside me. I didn't feel anything. I didn't even miss or love my children. My wife began attending to church and became a fervent Christian, so I eventually moved back into the guest room. I kind of existed in limbo, with no connection to anybody. Began counseling, tried different prescription medicines, and attempted a variety of therapies. I even attempted acupuncture, but it didn't help. When I went out one evening to get away from the home, there was a group of ladies at the restaurant. They were obviously out on a ladies' night out or something. We started conversing, and one of them started flirting with me. I could tell she was married because of the indentation on her finger, which indicated she usually wore a wedding band. We ended up performing the act at a motel. I accessed her phone when she was sleeping, and she had facial ID. It didn't take long for me to figure out she was married and had 3 children. I snapped a photo of the 2 of us in bed and copied her husband's contact information. I changed into my clothes and sent a photo of myself to her husband, along with an apology note. But I also lied and informed him that his wife had told me that this wasn't the first time she had done anything like this. Then I jolted her awake and informed her what I'd done. The agony in her eyes, the terror, it was awful, but at the very least I felt something. When I got home, I informed my wife about what I'd done. I informed her in such a manner that I attempted to hurt her as much as possible. I felt something again as I saw the sorrow on her face. I was in a bad mood, but at least I was feeling something. I now do this on a regular basis, going out every 3 to 4 weeks and picking up a married lady who wants to cheat for whatever reason. I've become pretty skilled at collecting evidence, and I often capture video of it. Sometimes I may develop it into a week-long affair, but in the end I always deliver the proof to their spouses. I'm not sure how many families have been split apart at this point. But I know it's wrong. But I can't help myself. It's a compulsive behavior that I can't break. Every time, I purposefully wounded my wife. I either tell her as cruelly as possible, or I put a used condom wrapper in my pocket. I'd even had some of the ladies write me love letters, which I purposefully place in my pocket for my wife to discover. I've attempted suicide a few more times throughout the years, but I simply can't do it. When an enraged spouse drew a revolver and pointed it at my head, I placed my forehead on the muzzle, smiled, and requested him to kindly do me the favor. But instead of pulling the trigger, he began weeping. My existence is torturous, and I lack the strength to end it. I'm still married, and I am well aware that what I'm doing is wrong on every level. I don't know how I ended up like this. The doctors don't seem to have a diagnosis for me either. My wife's affair broke me on a fundamental level. Or maybe I killed off part of my brain when I smashed it into the floor in that cabin. Anyways, be warned, I'm out there. Edit. I know I can't really blame my wife for this at this point. I can blame her for the beginning, but my continued general is on me. I can't really change it at this point. I hope to be able to at some point in the future.